You will see much in the human world, from the delightful to the depressing. And one day, when you have dwelt among humanity long enough, you will be placed to bring judgment over all as a spokesperson for Fontaine.
Wrath from the skies!
We have now made it to the final Archon before the Tsaritsa. It's been a long series, but I made sure to save Fontaine's God for last, since everyone has been waiting for me to do the Hydro Archon. And what better way to temporarily end this series than with a Hydro Catalyst character. My favorite type of unit. Here are the rules. We can only use Neuvillette, and we can only use the Eye of Perception, because why even bother at this point?
Ooh, me? Oh, in your face!
This is where we are in the stages of grief. Now let's see if we can beat Genshin Impact only using yet another Hydro Catalyst character. We start our journey trying to find the old man. Usually in life, if you're trying to find an old person, the two best options are either nursing homes or looking at casinos. And lo and behold, look what happens when you press F3 in this game. We did lose a 50-50 in our attempt to get Neuvillette, but I'm not too upset because we did get an Eye of Perception while summoning for him, and that is much harder to get than a limited character. I'm guaranteed the Hydro Archon. I'm not guaranteed this 4-star weapon. We know that from the Mona video. But now we have our weapon and we have our dragon, so let's get started. As per tradition with this line of characters, we struggled with the first part of Amber's Temple. Farber had issues because she's one of the early characters and I wasn't used to doing this at the time. Mona doesn't have a proper sprint and Neuvillette is just old, I guess. But he does have something that the other two don't have, height, which allowed us to jump over here instead of the normal side, making it so we could complete the first domain. And speaking of first, Kaya was next and we encountered the first Hydro immune enemies, but that doesn't mean we have to fight them. Lastly, for Lisa's domain, Neuvillette continued to do the skips better than the other Hydrodalists. Yes, we will be referring to them as the Hydrodalists. Is this a new nickname or is this a new slur? You can be the judge of that. With the ending of Act 1, I can now talk about the joys of using Neuvillette. And yes, you heard me say joys, because not only is this the best Hydrodalist user by far, but he is also one of the best characters I've used despite his debuff, and no, I'm not referring to his age. Before we continue the challenge, I would like to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, UGREEN, the safe, reliable, eco-friendly charging company. Some folks might remember last year's Kenichi themed box, but this time around, we have the UGREEN and Honkai Star Rail series inspired box. This one isn't like traditional boxes. As you can see, silly little me tried removing the top off, but this one actually opens by taking one lid and lifting it to the side so that it can open like a peacock train. This is a gorgeous looking container that is divided into two sections. The left side has a nice little tin badge of Yao Guang. Then we have this beautiful holographic ticket of her that mimics the summoning currency for Star Rail. And last but not least, we have the very cute little acrylic stand. That's the merch side of the box, which leads us to the right portion that I like to call the everyday side. First up, we have the Yao Guang brick, which is pretty simple. It's the Nexode Air 65W charger, but you can't just go far with the normal brick, which is why we have the retractable USB-C cable. Yes, the yo-yo looking device is actually a retractable USB-C cable that you can use for the brick or any other charging devices similar. And if you need to get the cables back to the starting position, it's pretty simple. You just have to stretch it out a little more and it'll pop right back into its default place. Next is the little tracker, which you can connect to via Bluetooth on apps like Find My iPhone. And we also have the slim MagFlow Air Magnetic Power Bank. This is a reliable and easily portable way to charge your device, whether it be with the wire or by just placing your device on the charger so it can be replenished via magnetic charging. But that's not the last of the useful devices, because there is also the Nexode Pro Power Bank that can charge up to 3 devices at once. You can check out the UGREEN and Star Rail series products with the link in the description. Thanks again to UGREEN for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back into the challenge. Neuvillette's normals aren't really anything special. The damage is pretty low, but aside from the cool looking animations and the over-the-top voice acting,
Hey buddy, are you okay?
There isn't much to really discuss about this because they only get used when I have to fight a Hydro immune enemy. And the reason why we don't use the normal attacks is because this character relies on charged attack gameplay. It's been a while since we've had to use a character like this, but Neuvillette has the best charged attacks out of anyone I've used, bar none. Neuvillette charges up a circle for what feels like a year, and once it's full, he shoots out a torrent of water. The numbers by themselves aren't anything crazy, but this attack hits 8 times, meaning that if you add all of them up together, he can get numbers that even rival Moika at certain points. Yes, he has numbers that can challenge the Big M. And plus, you can even see the rainbow when he does this move, unlike a certain other character.
Look, a rainbow!
The biggest problem with this attack, though, is that it does take a while to go off. It takes about the same amount of time to draw an actual perfect circle. So, what is the solution to this move, then? The rest of his kit. His skill summons a raging waterfall that deals damage. Disregarding the fact that this isn't even an actual waterfall, this skill's damage is solid, and it has like a 12-second cooldown, but you know, the damage from the skill is not what makes it useful. This isn't what scares Moika. If you hit an enemy, 3 water droplets drop on the ground, and these droplets charge up the water beam. Also, they heal Neuvillette, and that actually adds another rule because this means that Neuvillette can heal himself. I didn't know that before this challenge. I'm not really like the biggest Neuvillette fan. And why, of all characters, does Neuvillette need a heal? Because he needs it. No, but like he actually does. This character hurts himself by doing the laser. He is Fontanian. They all hurt themselves for some reason.
I'm with the Suicide Squad.
Fun fact, if I actually killed myself, you could get arrested for that.
As for the ult, I can't really hype this up because it doesn't really do like any insane damage or anything. The animation is pretty aura, but it's basically just like your skill hits for a couple of times and you get more orbs. It's just another way to reload the cannon that is our charged attack. But yeah, this character is basically just Power Wash Simulator. It's charged attack gameplay. You just hold down the button. He doesn't really have any downsides aside from his element and weapon combination. Losing HP would be a really bad trait to have on just about any other character I've used, but he's able to get it back very quickly. And it's because of all of his abilities, damage, and healing, and just overall design that he is the best Hydrodolus user I've had so far. But the bar is in hell with those characters. So let's see how he compares to the other Archons as we continue through Mondstadt. The Eye of the Storm is an enemy that most Catalysts do well against, so of course, if these blockheads do fine, Neuvillette is going to be amazing here. There is one thing I need you all to keep in mind that comes from this fight, and that is how high our laser can go. This is the maximum height that we can maneuver our laser, and this will matter later. But later is not now, because now we are up against the Fatui agent, and we could very much afford to look down on him. I have no idea why there's that ominous bell in Neuvillette's burst, but we now have the answer for who it tolls for. And honestly, it might as well toll for the entirety of Mondstadt because this nation is a nothing burger for Neuvillette. Like, nothing brings about any problems for him here. This character only has one gameplay loop. We did get to see our laser's max range as we played Window Wars with this one Hilichurl, and we did actually have to fight our first Hydro immune enemy, but once again, Neuvillette weaseled his way out of this one by using the Cryo Flowers. He is trying to ignore it. And as for the Dvalin fight, we see the Traveler try to LARP as Neuvillette by, you know, shooting lasers from his circle. Okay, nice try, bud. Don't you got an avatar to fight? Seems like Neuvillette is also LARPing, but this time as the Aztec High Priest trying to stop the cannonball after sacrificing 20 people to Quetzalcoatl. Regardless, it seems like Neuvillette might have actually performed some sacrifices because he finished Mondstadt in just 4 hours and 15 minutes, giving him a great time. And now that Neuvillette is the last Archon for this series, we will now have the answers for who the new gods of each nation are. And the Archon of Mondstadt is Moika. Something tells me that this will likely be a reoccurring statement for the rest of this video. If only we had a 5-star weapon to even the odds. Nope, it seems like that privilege is only reserved for Moika, the one who needs it the most.
I love chocolate, but I can't eat it because then I'll get fat. But it's so good.
Anyways, let's just go to the next nation and see if Neuvillette will be the Archon of Leeway. As it stands, we are about 30-ish minutes behind Moika, and when it came to the first parts of Act 1, Neuvillette did fine. I hesitate to say good for a specific reason coming up, but for the combat part, he did fine. The bell tolls, and Neuvillette is the one ringing it for most of these enemies. However, what slows him down is something different. It's this section right here. If this character was released in a patch that started after 5 point blank, then he could float across this. But he was released in 4.1, so he can't fly across with his charge attack.
I'm excited for 4.1.
This did slow down Neuvillette by like a couple of seconds, but this was just a small road bump. The stop sign fully drops once we get to Mountain Shaper, because we have to break the amber. Now, normally for these sections, when I have to use a Hydrotalist, the strategy is this. Get hit by the one electro enemy in the area, then you have to make grass burn near a rock. After that, you run into the fire to create overload, and that does damage to it. Why do we have to do all of this? Because most Catalyst characters cannot mine. And this sentiment carries for all of the Hydrotalists so far, so I assumed Neuvillette would be the same, which is why I spent about, like 5-ish minutes trying to get this combination to work. However, upon breaking the Pyro Shield, we found some earth-shattering news. The rock actually took damage. This surprised me because this isn't supposed to happen. Why is Neuvillette any different from them? And that's when I remembered that our skill has the Arca effect. I don't know the pronunciation, I took Spanish in high school. Donde está Español gang? Whenever we use our skill, this sword drops down. These attacks really only serve a purpose for some enemies in Fontaine. Until now. Because they actually deal damage to rocks, meaning we finally have a Catalyst character that can mine. Yes! I love Hydrotalist users.
I like it in here. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm right where I'm supposed to be.
Now, is this mining great? No. I'm pretty sure I could send someone in there and they would do this like much faster, but I would take this over the other method. This takes 10 minutes and a total of 48 swords to do. And what makes this even funnier is that he wasn't in this first rock, so I had to do it again. I was getting hyped for Neuvillette at the beginning of Leeway, but this did slow him down quite a bit. And realistically, I don't think Neuvillette is going to be able to catch back up to Mawika after this, especially because we also are going to have to deal with our own boss, the Millennial Seahorse. Millennials can be pretty cringe, and this Seahorse is not the exception to that.
Elder Millennial. Elder Millennial.
We saw in the Mawika video that most characters, aside from her, because of course, have bosses that resist their own character, and this does carry over to Neuvillette, sadly. But despite the heavy resistance against our damage, this really isn't that bad for Neuvillette. We've had to deal with much worse regarding these types of characters, so honestly, this is a blessing. The Seahorse does like to move around a lot, but a guy like me has insane tracking, so it doesn't matter too much. And it will shoot out the occasional unfunny joke to damage us, but our boomer does have enough I hate my wife comics to heal himself, making this surprisingly one of the better boss fights I've had to do with a solo character. Now that Neuvillette has defeated Impreg, he is eligible to ascend to level 50 and start Act 2. Beginning at the cooking pot, I was AFK for a moment.
Away from keyboard.
And during my absence, Neuvillette did his idle animation, causing it to rain. And since the rain makes Neuvillette wet, that also means it makes the fire wet, meaning that it is just impossible for Neuvillette to do this now. That is the only explanation for why this Hydro character could not use Pyro to heat up the stones. Act 2 is mainly just a lot of running back and forth to get Zhongli different items, but luckily we have a way to expedite this monotonous journey, using charge attacks to get around. Yes, this sadly is not much compared to what we had previously. This must be how the carriage riders felt when cars were first introduced. That'll never catch on, Neuvillette says, while he just floats around spraying water at nothing. Madame Ping decides to spill some tea, which leads to Neuvillette getting slimed out. Against the Electro Slimes, we did get a damage high of 2.2k, but like I said earlier, this character doesn't have individual numbers that are too high. His smaller numbers get added up pretty easily. However, neither of these damage sources matter when it comes to Neuvillette's first encounter with Hydro-immune enemies. Except he continues to weasel his way out of this because he gets to use the mines. Oh, he keeps trying to ignore it. After power washing through the Trial Grounds of Thunder, Neuvillette became AR-28, leading him to begin Act 3. With the Animo fan, this was once again a patch difference for Neuvillette.
I'm very hyped for the 4.1.
Change this to a 5, and he can do this. I have proof. So apparently in the last video, I said Mawika can't do this, but she did get extremely close. Since those days, I've received an email calling me an idiot and proving that, in fact, this can be done. You just need a device from Fontaine UGREEN's reputation system. So that's one less can't for Moeka, but that doesn't excuse Neuvillette. No sir, please come back to the stand.
Overruled. Overruled, Judge? Or is it overcooled?
Can you read that back to me?
Overruled, Judge. Or is it overcooled?
This is now the second can't for our judge, and to make things worse for him, his next opponent is his first hydro-immune enemy. But this time, there's nothing that can save him. So he's gonna have to do this all on his own. And it went about how you would expect these fights to go. So a fun fact, Ray Chase, the VA, wanted to redo these lines because he didn't know what the animations were like, which is why the sounds do not match at all. He was just told to do a sound for a, quote, big attack. All these grunts just for a slime present that Ningguang barely acknowledges. The final boss of Liyue is Child, and we've seen how this song and dance goes during the Fontaine quest. But is it the same here? No, because he has a lot of hydro resistance. I don't know why this wasn't a factor later.
Missed a spot.
Neuvillette finished Liyue in just 5 hours and 20 minutes, which is a really good time. But is this a good enough time to make him the Archon of Liyue? Sadly, no. He was short by just about 10 minutes, meaning that Moeka is also now the Geo Archon. But what sucks the most is that, like, if he was just any other weapon, he could have been able to do this. But since he was a catalyst and it takes about 10 minutes to break a rock, it failed him. And he had to do it twice. He was so close both times to beating Moeka, and honestly, if he couldn't beat her, I highly doubt that he can beat the 5th Descender known as Inazuma Nahida. But before we can test that theory, we have to do the Danes of Quest. You know, the one that's fun. Normally these 2 acts take me about an hour to do with a solo character, but when there's a hydro character in the mix, you have to allow for some extra time, which makes this quest extremely stressful because I was trying to do this before the Genshin Impact maintenance. We had exactly 1 hour to do these 2 quests, and I had to plan my playtime accordingly now. 60 minutes to go through numerous hydro-immune enemies, all while having to be sure the craftspeople save their work beforehand.
The architect and the builder.
After the first domain, we reached the next group of hydro mages with 50 minutes remaining, but luckily there were electro crystals that allowed us to break the shields much faster. And starting Act 2, we only had 40 minutes left, and I was making sure to go as fast as I could. I even used my charge attack to float over the water. My playtime was being planned accordingly, because I knew that this quest would be possible in the time because of the patch that changed the enemies here. All the hydro mages being changed to cryo ones is the only reason Neuvillette could do this part in this time period. He did it extremely quickly.
Drop him.
Defeating all the enemies in just 10 minutes, which left us with 30 minutes left to do the Hydro Abyss Herald. I knew this fight would be, like, guaranteed 25 minutes, so I put on a physical damage bonus goblet and went into the pit. There's not much I can try to say to build up the fight itself, because it's just Neuvillette grunting at a herald for over 20 minutes. But I was very much stressing during this time, because if we did not beat this enemy, then that would mean we would have to restart this entire fight after the maintenance, and we would have to go through this shield all over again. And I'm sure there's people out there calling me a baka and saying that I should have just waited for maintenance to end before doing this. And you know, I'm sure those people also have diapers that are full and need to get changed.
Get that ass bin.
But I'm glad I chose to do this because I'm stubborn and because I planned my playtime accordingly. And my planning was correct because we did beat this Hydro-immune demon with just 5 minutes left before maintenance. After that battle finished, the craftspeople saved their work and maintenance occurred, giving us patch 6.7, allowing Neuvillette to finish the quest and ascend up to level 60 before starting Inazuma. We've already seen the blueprint for how to beat the evil Moeka. Inazuma Nahida proved that elemental reactions are the key to dealing with this problem. And so far, Neuvillette was following this method by waiting for the armor to infuse the enemies with electro. However, he fails to go through with this plan because, you know, he keeps getting interrupted.
I hate it in here.
So Neuvillette did good for the first act, but let's see how he fares in Act 2 with archery. This may not be that surprising to some, given the gameplay shown for most of the video, but Neuvillette's water gun can actually reach and hurt the archery dummies. However, not all of them. Way back in the Mondstadt section, during the Eye of the Storm fight, I said that this was the maximum height for Neuvillette's laser, and that actually matters here. Neuvillette's laser has too much girth to just hit one target by itself, and we can only put the camera at a certain height, meaning we have to hit a couple of targets. And like I said, most of the dummies here can be done by Neuvillette, not, but sadly, some of them are just too close to the red ones. And the only reason the last target can be obtained is because of something I mentioned in the no damage video. If you hit 2 targets at once, the first instance of damage hits the left enemy before the right one. I don't know why, that's just how the game works. But we were able to use the game's logic to hit the last target. However, I did feel like there was something important I needed to bring up. I was joking earlier in the video how if this character was released in a patch starting with like 5, he would be better. And for this section, that's actually not entirely untrue, because someone on Twitter added me for a video showing that Sandroni can actually do the archery stuff with her charge attacks. Her lasers are smaller, and she has much better control over her aiming. So this is unironically a patch difference.
It's all old and dried out, like that man right there.
I'm like really excited for 4.1.
Unfortunately for our Hydro Dragon, this did take some time to experiment with, meaning that he did lose out on some time. But it looks like, god damn it, Neuvillette, stop crying. But it looks like Neuvillette has a chance to make up some time after the Electro Pillars, because he too blasted the Electro Biggie Churl, and he cleared through most of the Fatui enemies extremely fast. This character has no problem with damage, it's just the other bullshit that he has to deal with that holds him back. The bosses further prove that point, because aside from Senora using her Hu-Tao butterfly dash, Neuvillette completely stomped her. And this extends over to the almighty Raiden Shogun. Whenever Neuvillette didn't get interrupted, he'd probably beat the Shogun's second phase in the fastest time out of anyone. Neuvillette ended Inazuma after 16 hours, which is a really insane time. But as for his individual time completing this nation, he ended in 4th place, meaning that the LaSt ArChOn was not able to become the god of Electro, and that Nahida remains the Archon of Inazuma. Dainsleif Act 2 is where we've seen a lot of characters thrive, but not necessarily the Hydropolis. So given that Neuvillette is leagues ahead of them, does that make this quest any better for him? No. It's good that server maintenance was not about to happen, because if I had to plan my playtime, that hour would not have gone into this quest. I could have learned an instrument within that hour, but instead, I'm fighting multiple Hydro immune enemies again. Not much can be said for these fights, aside from, look at the time and hear the grunting. This is just the usual song and dance for these characters. But he can still break free from at least like some of the shackles, because he is able to destroy these batteries. It only takes 10 of them this time around. Maybe he's grown stronger since his time in Leeway. Well, this next quest immediately disproves that theory. I'm not even going to talk about Based. Neuvillette is basically just shooting out their body against them. Like imagine if I was hitting you with your own torso. But I want you to take a look at this first domain, and for this, we're going to take a look at my editing software so you can see the full video file. So this entire domain took about 42 minutes to do. See, this pop-up even says that like it's 42 minutes and 10 seconds. On first guess, you might think, like, oh, MistahFeet, you're so funny and attractive. But isn't that standard for areas with a lot of Hydro enemies? And that is true. Except this domain only has 2 Hydro enemies. But the main reason I showed the time earlier was because I was curious as to why this file was 40 minutes long. Because all there is to do in this domain is breaking 3 rocks and just fighting some enemies. But Neuvillette didn't have any problems with that. So it was hilarious to find out that in this 42-minute domain, 33 of those were trying to break these 3 rocks. And I feel like a fitting reward for this would be ascending Neuvillette up to level 70, giving him a passive that he can actually use. Basically, as long as Neuvillette is above a certain health threshold, his Hydro damage increases. And that's good because this character just scales from HP. He's just such a big boy, I don't know how else to describe him. If Neuvillette was going to be the Archon of any nation, Sumeru was his best chance, because every enemy for the first 4 acts just got gunned down immediately, and he didn't have to deal with a Hydro shield in the tree domain. Things were going very well for him up until the Dendro Pillars in Act 4. For some reason, the same issue that plagued Mawika here also occurred with Neuvillette. I don't know if it's because both of them have unique charge attacks, but for some reason, it is very finicky trying to get this to work. That right there took about 10 minutes. He cannot catch a break. Mawika continues to curse this man. How evil can she be? How bad can I be? Her remnants haunt this entire run because Neuvillette has to do everything Mawika avoided. He has to fight every enemy in the factory, he has to deal with Scaramouche's turrets, and he can't just fly past the island. Version 4.1.
Is this what justice means to you? Answer me!
Mawika?
I'm so excited for 4.1.
Neuvillette finished Sumeru in 27 hours and 17 minutes, and having an individual time of 7 hours, 46 minutes, and 35 seconds. Meaning that the last Archon is not the god of Sumeru. Once again, it belongs to Moeka. Neuvillette was 30 minutes behind her. I'm telling you, this whole run has been cursed by her. If he didn't have to deal with so much bullshit, he would be in the lead. Actually, you know what? He's not even dealing with bullshit. He's just playing the game fairly. She's the one who's been cheating everything. Fontaine is a nation that does give some benefits to Neuvillette. Outside of a unique diving animation, our skill can actually stun the Fontaine exclusive enemies here. And his materials were in Fontaine, so we did open up the map and collect some waypoints prior to starting this quest. Plus, there's the
Oratrice mécanique d'analyse cardinale.
new vocal stem unlock. But Fontaine was doing their best to help Neuvillette, but that doesn't mean the game was.
Damn, that is pretty
ass. He is spraying enemies down quickly, he is surviving hits, and he's not having to deal with any hydro shields in the Water Nation. But it's still just not enough, because he ended Fontaine after 35 hours and 33 minutes and an individual time of just 7 hours. But it seems like the LaSt ArChOn was still not enough to become the god of Fontaine by about 30 minutes. If this video were to determine the weather for all of Teyvat, then by this point, I think it should be pretty clear who is winning.
If you look at my screen closely, you can see there is a very subtle glare effect which indicates sunlight.
But nevertheless, this old man is going to stick it out for Natlan and give it his best shot. The first parts of Natlan were probably Neuvillette's best performance. He still does amazing damage, and there's only like 3 enemies in this nation that resist him, plus his charge attack shreds the abyssal shields. But even if we don't have the ammo to reload our cannon, our normal attacks that were once exclusively used for hydro shields basically do a good job here, especially since they can actually hit them, unlike another Hydrodolist.
I always thought I might be bad.
He's putting up numbers like this at this age. In all honesty, Neuvillette is the biggest threat to Moeka in this nation. For the ArChOn times, we only judge Natlan based on the first 5 acts because Venti was recorded first and that's all there was at the time. But once again, the last was only around 30-ish minutes behind Moeka, meaning that Moeka is the ArChOn of Natlan. Woohoo, yeah. But the main reason I bring up the times being judged on the first 5 acts alone is because Act 6 of Natlan is terrible for Neuvillette. We have to deal with numerous hydro shields in most of this quest. However, we are saved because of outside interference. Outside from the initial starting battle, we had soldiers from the Night Wind that applied cryo to help with these shields. The only issue with them is that we have to wait on them to move from each location, which can take quite a while. We were also able to use the burning grass from a pyro enemy to deplete these shields as well. This all took about 40 minutes to do in total, which could have been a lot worse given the lineup, but thankfully we did have support to deal with this section. Too bad they abandoned us in the next battle. The swordsmanship Dainsleif has mastered is about as effective as Neuvillette's laser when it comes to dealing with the abyssal candles, but his water is rendered obsolete compared to the might of the Twilight Sword. Here is what Dainsleif does to the hydro shields, and here's what we do to them. A battle lasting over an hour isn't exactly the best way to go out, but at least it didn't count towards the Natlan time, so the record books will always say that he was close to Moeka, even if this turns into a those who know situation. And after 44 hours, 43 minutes, and 12 seconds, we beat Genshin Impact only using Neuvillette. Neuvillette is now the bridesmaid that sadly never became a bride. I would have liked there to have been more art of the ArChOns being gods of different elements, but aside from Nahida, it just seems like Moeka will control almost every single element and become the Avatar. Let's just hope the Traveler doesn't see her. This is the second best character I've ever used, so let's see if the ratings fully justify that statement. Damage, I will go with the 4. The water is really strong, but it's also his biggest weakness. Exploration, 3. He's just a tall male, you know, nothing ridiculous is going on here. The charge attack can help you float across small rivers and stuff, but it's really not that useful outside of like a handful of things. Sustain, I will actually give him a 5. Yes, this character deals damage to himself constantly, but he's always able to heal it up pretty easily. I never had any issues with this character's HP. Bosses, I think I'm gonna go with a 5. Most bosses got completely shredded by Neuvillette, and even if I was taking into account the ones with Hydro Res, like Child and the Seahorse, Neuvillette still did fine against them. And lastly, ability/utility, I'm gonna go with a 5. This is a great kit to have on a solo character. HP scaling so he can be tankier on his own, great damage, consistent healing, and a passive that actually works. I would kill to be able to use a character like this for future runs. Overall, Neuvillette gets a 22 out of 25, giving him an A, making him the second highest rated character ever, behind you know who. While ending with an unbuffed damage high of like, I think around like 4k-ish, and a buff damage high of 7k. This character is dot slot slop, not burst slop, so I wasn't really paying attention to the numbers. Neuvillette has sadly been a victim of power creep. You know, I've made jokes alluding to various niche things that have affected him, but I do think there is some truth to those jokes.
Hyped for 4.1.
But either way, for solo runs and for my videos, I think this is one of the best characters I've ever had to use. And he's a Hydro Catalyst user, which is saying a lot. I unironically think that if he was any other element, he might have surpassed Moika. Maybe. But now, we have finally concluded this series with the LaSt ArChOn before the Tsaritsa.
Tell me